So, another very important topic is violence in the schools, including bullying. And as a homeschooler, I get calls from local people, but also messages from people all over America asking, how do I start homeschooling because we've had so much bullying and the school never does anything about it. And I see this on in my local Facebook group. My kid's being bullied and the school doesn't do anything about it. We've tried, and of course we've read the really horrible stories of kids as young as 10 committing suicide because the bullying was so awful. And of course, my first thought is always take that kid out, do something different, but take them out immediately. Don't wait for the school to fix it. But this is a question I've had for a long time. Why won't the schools fix it? And one of my previous guests kind of clued me into what I also read in your book, and that's that um, if they report these things, it becomes official, and all of a sudden the school has they're not safe. It's considered not safe anymore. Um, and this is something that you talked about too, that you don't want official reports of violence in the schools because that becomes the official narrative, not narrative, but you know what I'm talking about. Can you
Mhm.
explain that?
Yeah.
Because I want people to understand why the schools do not solve the bullying problem.
Well, there's two reasons. One is that school funding is based on enrollment. So the schools don't want to do anything to lose students. If
Hmm.
they expel a student, they lose the funding for that student. And that is something schools don't want to do. And if they continue to suspend students, that student may eventually drop out. I mean, it's about the money. It's like whatever they can do to keep more money. And that often becomes just turning the other cheek when there's school violence. This kid's violent, well, we're not going to do anything about it because if that kid leaves, we're going to lose the $20,000 attached to that kid. And that's what the schools don't want to do. Now, as far as the other part is concerned, when these instances are documented, like suspensions or expulsions, if there happens to be one, an arrest inside of a school, that looks bad on the school. And
Hmm.
in Maryland, we have something called a persistently dangerous statute, where there's a formula that if a school has so many suspensions or expulsions or arrests over a certain time period, that school will be labeled persistently dangerous. Now, there are 1,400 schools in the state of Maryland. The state of Maryland also has one of the most violent cities in the Western Hemisphere in Baltimore. You know how many persistently dangerous schools there are? None.
Zero
Zero. And the reason
on
there's
record.
on record. Now,
Yeah.
the reason there's zero is because principals know the formula. And when the formula starts getting close to being labeled persistently dangerous, and I interview teachers in Failure Factory that have told me this, the school will simply stop suspending, stop arresting, stop disciplining for anything, because as soon as the persistently dangerous label is placed upon a school, that school is going to shut down and the administration is going to lose their jobs. The last persistently dangerous school Maryland had was in 2015. It's been 11 years since Maryland has had a persistently dangerous school. And that school shut down. It was called Maritime Academy in Baltimore City. It shut down the following year. So if you're a principal, you are incentivized to not report instances of violence. And if there is significant bullying, you're incentivized not to correct it. Now, what that does is it leads to a cascading effect where other kids in the school will see this and then they'll realize they're not going to get in trouble and then they do it. And then ultimately what happens is the 90% of the kids that are in the school who want to learn, their ability to learn is inhibited because the adults in the school are not handling the problem appropriately. But again, it all goes back to money.
Well, and it's not just Baltimore again. Like I said, I had a guest on who is Texas based and it's happening here. So we have to
Yep.
assume that something similar is in place in all the states. And
Well,
maybe
I can
not
tell, I can
every
tell you
single
why.
school district. Yeah.
I can tell you why. So in January of 2014, President Barack Obama came to Baltimore and he had a press conference. And what he said was his administration looked into suspensions, arrests, and expulsion rates throughout the country. And what he found was there was a disproportionate amount of young minority males that were getting suspended, expelled, or suspended or arrested. And his conclusion was the schools must be discriminating against young minority males.
Yeah.
So he sent guidance to all 50 states, President Obama did, under his Department of Education. And what the guidance said was, you need to lower your suspension rates. They're way too high, and you're discriminating against young minority males. And the schools did. And if you look at the data, and I have the data in Failure Factory, you will see that arrests and suspensions plummeted after President Obama came out and said that.